Hello, Raven. As everyone says when they submit a story, I've been a long-time listener. I love your work, and it's been great to see the podcast grow so much over the last few years. Thank you. I have personally had a few of what I would classify as paranormal experiences in my life. Nothing too severe, but this one left me kind of chilled. I guess that it can be classified as both a sleep paralysis and a glitch in the Matrix story. My wife works as a nurse at our local hospital. She had, up until last week, worked a 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. schedule. But because of our children's schedules, a little girl aged 2 years and a little boy aged 4 months, she switched to a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. schedule. Less days, but longer days. This event happened yesterday morning. My wife was getting up and ready for work around 5:45 a.m. when our son woke up crying. She made him a bottle, burped him, changed him, and got him back to sleep. That took a good chunk of time, and it was about 6:10 when she came in to say goodbye to me. I was in the groggy half stage between asleep and awake. Those of you with ADT and similar security systems know that when a window or door is opened, the system chimes to let you know that a sensor has been triggered. This is a primary safety function, and one of my favorite aspects of the security package that we purchased. After she left and I heard the faithful ADT security system chime that the front door was open, I immediately fell back asleep. And that's when the weird things start. I entered a dream. One of those fully fleshed out dreams that seems so real that it was frightening. In my dream, my wife woke me up again after leaving, excited about an app that she found. She knows I love horror, and with the Halloween season coming up, it just seemed like a perfect time to show me. The app was an analog horror story about a man named William's interaction with an onryo, a Japanese spirit of vengeance. In my dream, it was still early morning, so I fired it up to read it out. And sure enough, the game starts with a series of journal entries about the protagonist's interactions with the spirit, and photos that he had gotten of the spirit. This app was terrifying to the dream me, and I opened the Play Store to look up reviews. And all of the reviews were saying the same thing. This app is terrifying, and after a certain amount of time, I started experiencing my own paranormal activity. There were a dozen or so reviews that said the same things, so Dream Me deleted the app and the dream more or less faded out. This is where it gets even more perplexing. I've always had the occasional bout of sleep paralysis. Nothing terrible, no malevolent beings, no Hat Man, nothing like that. My typical sleep paralysis entity is a black cat that joins me on the bed. I imagine it's because I used to have a cat named Kitty. Very creative, I know. When I was little, but she's been dead for almost a decade. And it's almost comforting to have these paralysis events, but I haven't had an experience like that in a few years. I woke up and was obviously in an episode of sleep paralysis. Couldn't move, couldn't talk, but I was almost fully conscious. I was expecting my usually harmless feline friend to enter the room and climb in bed, but that's not what happened. I heard a shuffling above me from our ceiling, and as far as I could tell, a being was burrowing through our ceiling to get to me. It dropped to the floor next to the bed, and I felt its eyes staring at me. It went on like this for a few minutes, but eventually I heard it shuffle out of our room, into the hallway, creak on the hardwood in our living room, and then open the front door. I knew it did, because of the ADT chime signaling that it had been opened. The paralysis did not subside, and I had the feeling of eyes on me for some time. I imagine it was staring at me through our bedroom window. The paralysis ended and my daughter woke up, and I heard her footsteps coming down the hall. As a parent, you learn the sound of your children's walks, especially on hardwood. So, I roused myself up, and with the dream and paralysis experience still in my mind, I texted my wife the whole experience and asked her if any of it were true. She had left that morning, and our security cameras confirmed it, but she did not return, and she did not show me a horror app. I then searched the App Store for this app, and surprise, surprise, it doesn't exist. Our security cameras and ADT app showed that no one left the house, or was in our yard after my wife left. I have no idea what to make of it. Not only did I create a whole horror app in my dream, I also had a strange sleep paralysis experience that, more or less, went hand in hand with the concept of the app, and the experiences the app users complained about. What does it all mean? If I have any similar experiences, I will post an update. Hello, Raven. Long-time listener, first-time submitter. I'm also a content creator on YouTube, so I'll be leaving my real name out of this story. Trolls. You know how it goes. What I'm about to tell you, I swear is 100% true and actually happened. Keep in mind, I'm very skeptical by nature, and when I listen to some glitch in the Matrix or paranormal stories, I can't help but think how much is embellished or straight up fabricated. So, for the listener like me hearing this, I am telling you on my life that these two unexplainable events really happened to me, and are not embellished. Some quick preface. I am a Christian, and 100% believe in things such as the spiritual world, and even the esoteric and the astral. The Bible even talks about the spirit world and to stay away from things like magic, esoteric, and the like. What makes my unexplainable situations so odd to me is that there is usually a light, positive or dark, or evil connotation with supernatural experiences. In my two cases, however, it was neither. It didn't feel evil, it didn't feel good. Just neutral, I guess. But extremely odd and bizarre. Anywho, enough backstory. Here are the experiences. True experience number 1. When I was very young, say about 4 or 5 years old, it was the early 90s, and our entire family would have a tradition of watching America's Funniest Home Videos with Bob Saget. A lot of 90s kids will remember this. We also lived with my grandparents at the time, so it was my mom, stepdad, and both grandparents all together that would almost nightly watch and enjoy the silly video compilations. Well, this is where I get goosebumps. One night, as we watched this show, there was the usual grainy video submission. The video submission shows an infant in a booster seat, maybe about 2 or barely 3 years old, and his family is singing the happy birthday song to him, with his birthday cake on their small dining table. I'm watching this on TV, and while they sing happy birthday, I start to see a very slow rising transparent brown alien-looking figure emerge up from the cake. It raised up to about mid-chest height, and was scrawny and weak-looking. To put it into perspective, the size of this boy's cake was about the same height of how much this brown, see-through alien creature raised from it was. It had pitch-black enlarged eyes, but not the stereotypical bug-looking alien eyes. These were almost like human-sized eyes, just pitch black and a bit larger than normal. And it had a smile that was pitch black as well. No teeth. It almost looked cartoony, and I also remember its neck being really stretched. So I'm only 4 or 5 years old seeing this. No one else in my family watching reacted to this clearly supernatural thing being shown. It was as if I was the only one that could see this happening. They were just chuckling at whatever was funny in the video. If I saw this as an adult, I would probably faint or run out of the room, but being a young kid, I see this and I wasn't scared at all. Just more confused and trying to make sense of why this was supposed to be funny. I also understood enough in my world at that age that what I saw was not something that was normal to see. I never brought this up to them when I saw it, though. I just kept it to myself. And check this out. I swear that this is not a joke. Some moments of time pass, I can't remember exactly, maybe a few months, and we watch a rerun of this episode, and they show the same video submission. I see the exact same thing again, but this second time, I recognize the submission and am looking to see if it happens again. And sure enough, it did. Same reaction, though. I wasn't scared, or even felt anything evil from it. Just more confused on what it was, and that no one else in my family saw what I was seeing. I still kept it to myself. I'm really not sure why. So, fast forward decades later, I remember this happening to me as a child. So I try my best to search on YouTube, and anywhere on the internet for that matter, the same video submission that I saw as a kid from those early 90s episodes. And I can't find it anywhere. I looked for a long time. I cannot find that video submission anywhere. I have a very good long-term memory, and I'm certain I was not dreaming when this happened. It was just very odd. True experience number 2. This next unexplainable experience happened during my teenage years. So I think I was maybe about 12 years old. I was, and still am to this day, a big gamer. So young teenage me was staying up very late one night, playing a PlayStation 1 platformer game called Skull Monkeys. A very underrated game, by the way. I wholeheartedly agree, and I love that game. I was 12 with no job or income and somewhat of a lower class family, so it was rare that I would be able to have games bought for me. Because of this was a game that my parents would let me rent from Blockbuster several times. So, this one particular night, I was playing it, and I did my best to beat it, as I know that I would have to return the game back soon. I stay up to about 3 a.m., and I play a graveyard level with ghost figures everywhere in the foreground and background. Interesting level type that I was playing considering what happens after. I couldn't stay up another minute, so I call it a night and turn the game off. And then I head to my bunk bed to sleep. So I crawl to my top bunk. My little brother's sleeping below, out like a rock. And I'm laying there ruminating on the game and humming the graveyard level's background music in my head. Then, I hear clear as day in the corner of my room, a bizarre, almost otherworldly sound, which can only be described as a digital xylophone. I can't mouth the sound that it played over typed words, but it was basically a brief series of single notes played up in a major scale, then played back down in the same scale. This wasn't from any toy or object in my room. I knew my room then very well. The sound was just something unexplainable. And again, no feeling of evil or good, just an unexplainable glitch or whatever you want to call it. However, safe to say though, this one freaked me out. I hid under my covers with my heart sinking down to what felt like my feet. I've probably never been more scared. My younger brother was fast asleep and obviously didn't hear anything of what I heard. It was terrible. I had no choice to stay in my top bunk under the covers, and I was running on fear and adrenaline, hoping that whatever the hell made that bizarre noise wasn't anything malicious. I also didn't know if this would happen again, or had no idea what in the world made those series of digital notes. But that was it. The noise never returned, and I eventually was able to fall asleep. Just like this one, I never told my family what I heard. Thanks for letting me share these true experiences that I had. And thank you for reminding me that skull monkeys exist. Hi there, Raven. This is a long story, but it is true. I'm not sure what it was that my friend, who passed away not that long ago, and I had seen that night. Anyway, here we go. I'm from Adelaide, Australia. This was going back either to 1989 or 1990. My friend Tony and I were just teenagers about that time. It was nighttime, around 9 or so, and close to around Easter. I met Tony in our local football oval, just to hang around and chat like we usually do. We sat on a bench near the goalpost and just were talking about what teenagers talk about. About 20 minutes had passed since we sat down, and I realized that Tony went absolutely quiet for some reason. I only realized this while I was looking at the ground and asked him something, and he didn't respond. I looked up and turned to face him, and I saw his mouth wide open and his eyes bulging out of the sockets. I said, "Hey, Tony, what's wrong?" And then I quickly looked towards the direction that he was fixed at, and saw nothing. But then I basically went cheek to cheek and slowly turned my sights to where he was looking, and that's when I saw what had made him quiet. Across the oval on the opposite side where the goalposts are, I saw what I thought at first was a tree trunk on fire. I said to Tony, "Some idiot set that tree on fire." But the longer I looked, the clearer it got. There was no tree on fire, because there was no tree where this pillar of fire stood. Then, while both of us were looking at this thing, staring, the two of us got up in unison and started walking towards this thing. While walking, I blinked my eyes, rubbed them, and even turned away and then looked again. But that thing was still there. I pinched myself hard to make sure that I was not hallucinating. Also at that time, I noticed that there were no cars on the main road that was alongside the oval, and no wind. No noises of anything really, just the sound of our feet walking on the grass. We walked to the middle of the oval, basically where the cricket pitch is, and stopped. We were staring at a 9-foot-tall human-shaped entity on fire. Now, this fire was not orange like you see when you're lighting up a lighter, but this was a very red-looking flame. Tony turned and bolted, running back to where we first saw this thing, but I went even closer, maybe 8 more meters, and then stopped. Then I looked at this thing's feet, and then slowly started to look up. I saw the shape of its legs, waist, torso, head, and hair. Now, where this thing stood, it looked like the wind was making its long hair fly up about to its ends. It also had this almost dull white aura around him. I have to mention that when we were walking towards it, It was almost like we were being controlled. I had no fear, but when I saw the aura around this entity, a small knot of fear in my gut got bigger and bigger until all of my body screamed to get the hell out of there. That's when I turned around and ran for my life. I remember just seeing Tony clumsily jump the chain link fence, about waist height. The poor dude's legs were not working well. In that exact time, I saw another friend of ours, Brian, who was walking along the footpath. Brian was 18 at that time, who Tony then ran towards and wrapped his arms around the waist of our friend, and was crying with snot coming out of his nose, and trying to speak, but he wasn't making sense. Our friend Brian said, "What the hell? Get off of me. What are you doing?" and tried to push Tony off of him, and that's when I jumped over the fence and said to Brian, "Dude, did you see anything, or do you see anything at the oval at goalpost?" And with an angry tone, he said no. With that, Tony let go of Brian and ran back home, and I did the same. It wasn't until the next morning that I called Tony and asked him if he could tell me what was it that he'd seen that last night. When he told me that he saw a tall human on fire, that's when I said, "Yeah, I saw the same." It took maybe 2 years after that. Whenever I used to cross that oval to go home, I refused to look at the direction of where that fireman stood. Now, I'd like to know, was this a fire elemental or some evil entity that we saw that night? Any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. And thank you for taking the time to read this, Raven. I also want to say that I love listening to your narrations of stories that you tell. They are fantastic. Well, thank you. So, I was riding with my wife and my sister's husband. I was in the back of the car due to the fact that I had to sit sideways to fit into the car. I was sitting facing the side window, and I saw this Mustang Mach 1. For those of you that don't know, it's a muscle car from the 70s that is considered one of the best Mustangs. This Mustang was in the process of being restored, I guess. It had a flat paint job, and the body looked a little rough. However, the engine was sounding nice. So I shot this guy a thumbs up, as my brother was also big into muscle cars. I knew the amount of work that went into getting an old car to sound like that. He smiled at me and gave me a thumbs up back, and then revved his engine. This is where it gets bad. Trigger warning, as this involves injuries and death after this point. After he revved his engine, it seemed like something went wrong. The car leaped forward and he looked surprised. That was all I could see at that time because he was past us and moving fast down the road. The car lurched to the side towards the curb and impacted hard. I watched a burst of dust and debris fly from under the car. I think his rear tire blew. This caused him to rebound and fly across the lanes of traffic into oncoming. He then hit a minivan head-on, and the both just stopped. My brother-in-law stopped his car. My wife and I jumped out to see if we could help. My wife had some medical training, and I have had some first aid training through work. She went to check on the minivan, and I went to check on the Mustang. My brother-in-law was getting out flares to warn other drivers. This part still gets to me because I feel partly responsible. When I got to the Mustang, the driver was partially arched over the bench seat. The Mustang's bench seat didn't have a headrest like modern cars, so just below his shoulders was over the seat. I know this may sound cliche, but I saw the light go out of his eyes. I knew that he was dead. I had just watched him die. I still went up to check his pulse, but there was nothing. I can't help but blame myself, partly for the thumbs up. Maybe if I hadn't done that, he wouldn't have revved his engine, and then this whole thing wouldn't have happened. The driver and the passenger in the other vehicle were okay. One had a broken wrist, and I don't remember if the other had anything but minor injuries. I do have to say that the paramedics got there fast. By the time I checked the Mustang driver's pulse and stepped back, the aid car had already arrived. The paramedic confirmed my assessment and then moved on to the minivan. Thank you, Raven. I was listening to your road trip stories and was reminded of this. Keep up the great work. I have been a fan for about 2 years now, and I finally mustered up the gall to submit my stories. I'm from South Africa, and we have every bit the weird and wonderful and outright scary happening here, but that's a story for another time. I apologize for being wordy and this being long. I experience what you would call lucid dreams. I've been having these types of dreams ever since I can remember, although I only began to take notice of them once I became an adult. My sister seems to think there's some type of clairvoyance that's been passed down from our mother, but heck if I know. In November or December of 2021, I was gravely ill and on strong medications plus bed rest. During one of my fevers, I had one of my dreams. I'll premise this by saying that my house is very nearby to the area where everything takes place, and that in my dreams, all of them, home is familiar but the setting is different. An example, my house will look different but the interior is the same. Anyway, in the dream, I'm in the town square when water begins to rise and people begin to flee. In an attempt to flee, we get into vehicles with each other. Mind you, we're all strangers here. And we're crossing the bridge to get to safety, and at this point, the water is so high that the bridge is beginning to bob. We managed to get across just in time, and while driving up to higher ground, the end of the bridge were small businesses and residential areas, so the higher ground, the banks burst and the brown swirling waters of the river spew over, flooding the road and into people's yards and businesses. As fate would have it, the water came to a stand just 1 block away from my house. Talk about lucky. I began dreaming this every time I had a fever until the first week of January 2022. I was freaked out about it, and my partner told me to call home to see if everyone was okay, since I live in a different province from them. I told my sister about my dream, and she said maybe it was an indication that I'd be crying soon. Our mom was fighting cancer, so we thought she would pass, and that the breaking of the riverbank was us breaking down, but that wasn't the case here. Lo and behold, the very next week, my hometown was receiving heavy downpours and rising river levels to the point that it burst the banks and flooded the neighborhoods, falling just short, and you've guessed it, 1 block away from my house. My partner sat in awe of the news, saying that I saw the future. He was reading an article which stated that total strangers pulled together in vehicles to escape the floods in town, and that the bridge swayed as the rapid waters overtook the bridge. I, on the other hand, was freaking out because I began to wonder if I dreamt of death. Would it come true? I have since had a few other dreams come true, but nothing quite like this. Hey there. To start off, I've had some weird, odd, and unexplainable events happen to me. But the one that I'm writing about is probably the weirdest one. So, it was my best friend's birthday party, and we were waiting for all of our friends to arrive. She suggested that we go into her room while we wait. Just a note, it was me, her, and her stepsister, who was the same age. We headed up to her room and sat on her bed talking about stuff going on in school and stuff like that, until we heard a subtle knock from inside her closet. Her sister got up immediately and whipped open the door. She stood there staring into the closet. I asked my friend what was going on, and she said watch and look. I looked on the closet, and a few seconds later, 2 pairs of jeans fell from the shelf. They both laughed. I sat on the bed in shock, trying to comprehend what I had just witnessed. Her dad came upstairs and yelled at them to stop throwing stuff on the floor, and they both said okay. When he left and closed the door, both of them told me that that happens often, and they haven't told their parents about it yet. My friend told me that they lived in a house built in the 1800s. It looked that old as well, and there was bound to be at least a few lost souls or evil entities of sorts. I soon realized that this was true later. When everyone arrived, we all took turns playing on an Oculus. They all left except my friend's stepsister and my other friend from school. I was playing until I felt something hard push me over. I fell hard, hitting my head on a wood box. And thank goodness I didn't get any injuries. I yelled at both of them asking why they threw a mattress or something at me, and they said they didn't. When I took the Oculus off, they were sitting on the bed, on the other side of the room. So I just assumed that my body just gave out. The thing that scared me most was when we were eating cupcakes. Don't get me wrong, it was scary. We got the cupcakes and all, and we sat down. The cupcake flew out of my hand and landed icing first on the dirt. This was outside. I picked it up, and the 2 dots were compressed into the cupcake itself. This wasn't even the scariest part. I showed my friend who had the birthday party, and they said that was weird, because she had a cat and a dog that died in the same place that we were eating, and it was on the date of the birthday party. And lastly, the thing that made shivers run down my spine. We all went inside after playing, and we went inside to watch the new Little Mermaid movie. There was a corner in the living room, and a couch sat in front of the corner with a little space, or hideout as my friend called it. When Ariel was singing Part of Your World, a loud whisper came from that corner, and was mimicking the song, and everyone heard it. The parents didn't hear it though, which everybody thought was weird. Everyone was trying to convince the parents, and the parents did say this though, that someone had died in that house on November 15th of 1989. The exact year and month, and only 2 days before the original Little Mermaid was released. Hi Raven, it's me again. This event happened this past Wednesday, when my hubby and I took a walk to our local gas station in the evening for water refills and some ice cream as the spring heat unleashed its wrath upon us. I'll premise this by saying that it is not unusual for me in particular to notice strange movements in the sky, as that's my favorite thing to do. Most of the time it's what we assume to be satellites, the Starlink type. And if we're lucky, a few shooting stars. Where I'm based in South Africa, we don't really see shooting stars often, unfortunately. On to the occurrence. We had walked barely 30 meters out the gate when I see a bright flashing red light. At first I thought it was a reception tower, but my brain was like, no girl, that's not it. And I turned to my hubby pointing to it. He looks up and nonchalantly says, "It's just an airplane, love," and carries on as if it's just a normal thing. To be fair, it is a normal thing to see airplanes in the night sky, so maybe I was just freaked out. Who knows? Anyways, at this point, I'm not having the airplane explanation, and stop abruptly in the middle of the road to prove him otherwise. Because for some strange reason that I can't shake, I point up again and we stare at the sky for a good few minutes. I reiterate that it is not moving at all, and this is not normal. It continues to flash bright red, and we walk on slowly with me not moving my eyes, until it suddenly just blips out of existence, like it was never there. Strangely, I felt relieved. And while I sit here and type, I cannot tell you why. Hubby goes on to say that it must have just been a satellite, and while I guess that could be a possibility, that feeling of uneasiness says otherwise to me. Has anyone experienced anything similar, or am I just kooky? Because this lives in my head, rent-free. So that, my friends, was a True Scary Stories from You collection. A collection of stories that all came from subscribers on different topics, things that didn't quite fit in other videos, or did and I just didn't get them into the video on time, or I had too much and had to move them around. It just happens. That said, this story seemed to lean heavily into strange and weird stuff. And I'm here for it. Sometimes this ends up being a paranormal collection with a couple, let's not meet style stories sprinkled in. Sometimes it ends up being a stalker collection with a couple paranormal stories sprinkled in. This time, it was all just really weird. Like I said, I'm here for it. Thank you to each and every single one of you who submitted your stories to me. I do appreciate it so very much. Patrick M., Spicy Punk Rocker, Peter, Marc Gillihan, MissTazyD, and Glasstree424, thank you so very much. You are all amazing. All of you who listened to this video are also amazing, but those people submitted their stories, so indirectly, and got them in this specific video, where it's late and my brain is frazzled and I just called out everybody who submitted the story. I don't know. I did what I did. Accept it. Anyways, friends, hopefully you enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. That would help tremendously. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please consider subscribing. And of course, if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to submit it. You may end up in a collection like this. You may end up in a themed collection, depending on how many stories I get on that theme. You'd be surprised how well that works out sometimes. It typically works out, to be honest with you. Anyways, yeah. You can also join Patreon membership, where you get early access to content like this and other stuff, depending on how you sign up. You can also do Super Thanks, which is a support to the channel, which is always appreciated, but never expected. Yeah. All that said, my friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. It is 11 o'clock p.m. right now on Thursday night. Trying to get this stuff done early. Yeah. I don't know. I got nothing else to say. Hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope you have a beautiful night. Hope you have a beautiful week. I will see you later on the live stream, right? 8 o'clock Central? 7:30-ish Central? It'll be scheduled. You'll see it. Yeah. I hope you remember you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until I see you again, my friends, much love, and sleep well.